Welcome to Fight News Now Extra. I'm John Pollock. It was a packed weekend of mixed martial arts. We're going to break down some of the highlights that stood out with John Ramdine and Robin Black, a look at the new Bellator, along with the UFC's first stop in Mexico while World Series of Fighting took place from Tampa. UFC 180 was headlined in Mexico City by the crowning of Fabricio Werdum as the promotion's interim heavyweight champion, stopping a tough and durable Mark Hunt in the second round after a flying knee sent Hunt south to the mat and was finished with strikes. This came after a relaxed Hunt placed pressure on Werdum and having success with his right hand, even jumping into Verdum's guard at one point. The win by Werdum sets up the inevitable fight with Cain Velasquez for 2015. Bellator put on a new coat of paint in San Diego with a slick new entrance ramp and a fresh presentation for the promotion. It all led up to the night's main event where Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner went 3 rounds, with Ortiz taking a split decision nod after outstriking Bonner, who did little to defend the strikes being thrown and was also susceptible to numerous takedowns by Ortiz throughout the 15 minutes. After the bout, Ortiz gave Bonner the finger and tossed water onto his opponent, which did result in a fine by the California State Athletic Commission. And finally, World Series of Fighting was in Tampa on Saturday night, featuring middleweight champion David Branch getting past a tough challenge in Yushin Okami. After an early takedown by Okami, it was a heavy clinching affair between the two with little in the way of excitement until the 4th round, where Branch connected with a right hand, sending Okami down and finishing the former UFC fighter at 3:39 of the 4th round. I'm here with Robin Black and John Ramdine. Man, what are we going to talk about today? It was a pretty quiet weekend. I think there were some football games on Sunday.
What's football?
Foxcatcher just came out, a limited release in New York.
I heard it's excellent, though.
I can't wait to see that movie. Anyway, let's get into this weekend. I could talk about Foxcatcher.
Me too.
What was the highlight of the weekend? We had 3 major cards. I think a lot of highlights spread out. But starting with you, Robin, what really stood out for you as you look back at this weekend?
Schilling and Manhoef, actually. Like, to see the level. I love the skill. I love the exhibition of martial arts skills and talents. And when you see guys of that level, Manhoef was an animal too. Like, he was a rabid animal, and the technical skill was so beautiful. Joe Schilling's 3-2 was just so on point, and you can really tell the difference of that level of striking against, as a typical new guy undercard MMA fighter.
For you, John, looking at the 3 cards, I mean, what was really the standout?
It really depends. I absolutely love Joe Schilling. Melvin Manhoef is one of my favorite fighters of all time. But you have to look at the way the UFC Interim Heavyweight Championship unfolded. Fabricio, I think a lot of people expected Fabricio Werdum to win this fight because, he had a long training camp. He was preparing for Cain Velasquez. Mark Hunt takes this fight on short notice. We all believed that Werdum was either going to win a decision or more likely he was going to end up submitting the Super Samoan. I don't think anybody anticipated that we'd get to see a TKO victory for the Brazilian. So, yes, Joe Schilling, Melvin Manhoef was awesome, but the way that Werdum finished the show.
I give all credit to Mark Hunt, who to me overachieved in that fight.
Yes, for sure.
Won the 1st round, was on his way to winning that 2nd round as well. And you could see Werdum was starting to get really frustrated with this game that Hunt was employing, and with that right hand he landed in the 1st round. Hunt even jumping into his guard like a madman. I think Mark Hunt, for all of the things that we talked about last week, this guy literally had every excuse, and he didn't use any of them after that fight.
We were talking about on 5 rounds, and not all challenges are equal. And fighting Werdum on a couple of weeks, being way overweight. And Mark Hunt is a big dude all the time, having to cut 30 pounds at elevation in another country, all that kind of stuff.
Does he learn from that? Do you think that this is maybe a wake-up call that, in between fights now, I really have to treat myself. I am a world-class athlete.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it last week. It's, when the heavyweight title lies in the balance, like, it takes 1 or 2 fights. Mark Hunt, you never know what happens. He can go out and knock out his next 2 opponents. He can beat Barnett. He can beat Travis Brown. And he could find himself in this situation once again. I don't know if it's going to happen, but it's conceivable that it could. So
it's a guy, brutal weight cut, 40 years old, elevation, 3 weeks notice, and he's more than hanging with Fabricio Werdum.
He fatigued at the end of round 1, and that's a shame when you saw him do 5 rounds with Bigfoot. But it's an interesting one because we also talked about this. It's in play. You get called. Are you going to be a company man to take the fight,
Yeah.
well, yeah, you got it, because it literally might be the only time it happens. So taking into account that when the phone rings, you're going to take it, you better always be in shape. And there's nothing to criticize Mark Hunt about. Nothing. This is super Samoan.
However,
but
you know,
it'd be nicer if he was in shape.
It's true, but we've heard from George St-Pierre in the past. He defends his title on Saturday. He might take 1 or 2 days off, but chances are Tuesday he's back in the gym honing his skills. And for Mark Hunt being 40 years old, you got to be ready for the call. So that means you can't get yourself way out of shape. You got to get back to the gym.
I do have one other thought on that, and that's easy for us to say. But the reality of 22 years of your life being dedicated to combat sports, do any job. Go whether you shovel snow or you work at a TV network or you're a doctor. Go 22 years and never, ever unplug your brain. You can't do that. You can't. You have to live like a human being, too.
Let's move over to Bellator, because this was certainly a big focus. This was the fresh coat of paint that everyone was anticipating from Bellator. I thought this felt like such a refreshing presentation of mixed martial arts more than anything. I think we can look at the UFC right now that as they run all these cards, they've really fallen into this pattern, whether it comes to their countdown specials, the way they present fights. We come back from break, 2 fighters are in there. Well, Bellator, they're going to do the opposite. Elaborate entrances, doing a lot of things in between fights, really having these guys come across like stars, announcing big fights for all the way down the road.
Valet's walking the guys out.
No, really, I think they did such a
Some people might not like it, but they clearly are going, what is the UFC not doing? What is the hole we can fill? We're not going to try and be UFC light. We're going to try and be Bellator strong. And that's what they did on Saturday.
Exactly. And the most important thing is that you need the fights to deliver. And that's why you sign fighters like Melvin Manhoef to battle Joe Schilling.
Which is a fight that you would never see the UFC book.
That's right. And it's Coker has said it in the past. We're here to entertain people. We're here to make sure that people are excited about the Bellator product. And when you have a fighter like Mike Richmond and Nam Phan that you know they're going to throw down and get people talking, you have to put them on the card. And then, as you mentioned before about, you know, looking at the future, you have Paul Daly taking on Douglas Lima for the title. Make that announcement. Get people excited about it.
If you have a steak restaurant and you want that thing to spread all over the globe, you make systems and you just reproduce it, no problem. Same steak everywhere. You can't do that with entertainment. You can't do that with sports. You can't do that with combat sports. That's kind of what the UFC has done, and Bellator is the antidote right now.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that by the time Bellator holds their next card, UFC will hold, I believe, 7 cards before that time on January the 16th. For Robin Black, John Ramdeen, I'm John Pollock. More Fight News Now Extra is coming up.